Good evening and welcome to Tech in 20s, a thought leadership event series curated for you by Edelweiss Wealth Management and Google Cloud. Before we launch into today's agenda, let me just give you a quick context of what this series is all about, who this is for, and what we attempt to uncover or unravel through the series of conversations that we will have. Well, the idea of Tech in 20s came from you, our clients, many of you who lead companies, are CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, or are senior professionals. Conversation after conversation, one of the grapples when I asked you, you said you were grappling with technology and technology strategy. And few pointers emerged. Number one being, how is my peer group doing on technology strategy? How are they going about it? Are there any practices from the rest of the world that you could see in your industry? The other important factor being, what business outcomes can you link to technology and technology strategy? A lot of questions on how can you enhance customer experience, increase productivity, or better your efficiency, and how do you actually link metrics which are business led to technology? The other factors that I have heard from you is what are the trade-offs? What are the choices we have to make? And where do the struggles come on execution? And finally, I think the biggest question that we've heard is, how do you ever measure the return on investment on technology? Because year after year, my CTO keeps coming back and says, this year we have to increase the budget. So how do you go about that? So these are some of the questions we'll try and unravel or uncover as we go along this series. I'm delighted to announce this partnership with Google Cloud, a global leader in cloud services and digital services. And between us, we will try and figure out from a broad agenda initially, going into sharper industry level or problem grapples as we speak, as we progress this series. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm pleased to welcome two industry veterans, Karan Bajwa and Mitesh Agarwal of Google Cloud. Between them, I think they have a great vantage point from what's happening in technology, technology trends, how companies are adapting, where they're struggling, and so on. But also, they are at the forefront of creating a lot of these trends. So we'll be very eager to hear from them. But let's do a quick introduction. Karan Bajwa, he is the VP for Google Cloud Asia Pacific. He comes with over decades of technology. All revenue lines, all go-to-market businesses of entire Asia Pacific for the entire Google Cloud platform report into Karan. He is a veteran, as I said. He comes with a lot of experience in senior leadership positions from earlier with Microsoft and with IBM. Karan, welcome, and thank you so much for doing this with us. Also, quickly to introduce Mitesh Agarwal, another veteran, 2 decades and above of experience. He is the Director of Customer Engineering for Google Cloud India. He's been with Oracle earlier for 18 years and has done a lot of work on consulting in technology, on product strategy, tech architecture, and implementation. So by all means, we look forward to your questions. Do write in. Our teams will filter your questions and we'll be delighted to answer these questions. Mitesh, welcome. It's great to have you and thank you so much for your time. If I may, Karan and Mitesh, the first question is for both of you. If I may just launch into this conversation. And this is for, I'm representing most of our clients who are not technology people, including myself, right? Constantly, we are bombarded with these terms called AI, ML, big data, and now the recent term is digital transformation. So from what you see, and this whole acceleration in the pandemic, so how do you see, and what are you seeing as far as India is concerned? What is this digital transformation all about? And maybe then you can add as to how we are different from rest of the world. Karan, please.
Sure. Thank you very much, Anshu, and it's an absolute delight to be there with you this evening. And thank you for all the attendees who are joining in, taking precious time out. It's not easy these days sitting in front of a screen. I know that. So I really appreciate the opportunity you're giving us. I do hope everyone's super safe. These have been a very, very tough time for all of us, and it doesn't seem to be ending yet. So I think we have some more toughness ahead of us, and I really hope and pray everyone is holding up super well. If you think about Anshu, what have businesses done over the last year and for the first 2 months of this year? I think it's been scrambling to respond to the challenges that have been thrown at us. Um, and the challenges and the dimension of those challenges both have been unprecedented. Look back, you know, I've been in the industry for 32 years now. I can recall having spoken to people going as far as 50 years. Nobody can imagine, think about anything that was even close to the challenge and the change that has been thrown at us. I simply, there are many moments in history of technology when a big shift has happened. And when history will be written about today's time, I think this will be counted as one big shift of in the technology industry. I don't know what it's going to be called, whether it is going to be recalled with a positive sense, negative sense. We shall know when history is written. But the one big change that has happened, Anshu, is you go back a year and two, maybe 1 year and 2 months. Uh, Digital transformation is not new. People had started talking about transforming through digital at least 4 to 5 years, depending on the sector you are in, the industry you are in, how much are you seeing disruption coming from the new age companies. Digital transformation was a core part of the strategy of any company in any sector. What has happened is that from a point where digital was a part of the strategy to a point now digital is the strategy. That is the foundational shift that I have seen across all industries. We will see how organization CEOs, boardrooms are going to make their businesses accountable to execute on their digital transformation faster. Because it's not about doing your business differently, it's about survival. Because suddenly there are people who are going to be in your business who have zero legacy. They're going to start with a very fresh pair of eyes, and they're going to do things very differently. And they will not have the tradition or the legacy of some of the businesses. So they will do it very differently. So your challenge is going to be embracing that, what we now famously call as the new normal, and how you're going to be able to show up, if at all, God forbid, a next disruption shows up. It's very difficult. Most businesses don't have appetite to handle many disruptions in a lifetime. And we've seen one, and it's been a big jolt. The current crisis is, as I said, it's a big jolt, but yet an opportunity to make very foundational challenges. If you see the last 10 years, if not the change has not happened in our business, how you do banking today, how you insure your business today, how you do supply chains, how do you engage with your partner ecosystem, is fundamentally different from 10 years ago. And on your businesses and think about it. But the pace of change over the last 1 year is completely different, and that is the change that is happening. In most cases, what you have done in the last 10 years would look like incremental change. How do businesses decide what to ship when there is no supply chain? How do you run physical stores? But now we have found ways, but think about the first 2 3 months, and there are many such examples. How do you ensure get ready for whatever is next? And now the next is unknown. So think about the complexity of that situation, and that is what we are faced with. I think organizations, if I see them, they are moving to a digital first model, as I said, to meet this change. Um, think about think about how banks have responded. Banks have transitioned to, well, they now do virtual relationship management, they do remote sales, they do remote servicing. They've done a lot of digital outreach to customers, including making flexible payment arrangements for loans, mortgages. But this won't be enough. This is still not. This is still incremental change. They have to fundamentally reimagine customer journeys to reduce the friction and shift to completely digital engagement channels. Of course, as the surface area of digitization increases, um, security assumes a very different proportion. We've also seen the uptake. For so much time, we have said data is the new water, data is the new oil. We've seen data-led businesses happen now. Anshu, for us, for some of us who've lived this industry now for the last 20 plus years, are very well trained to take business decisions by gut. I think the time now is business decisions are being based more on data than on gut in that sense. So these are some of the foundational elements of any digital transformation. And I always tell every CEO, whenever you get back to your offices, and I wish and hope you do soon, if not already done, the opportunity for you is to fundamentally look at your business and think about how would you do this if you were starting your business today and you had zero knowledge of the past and you had zero things stopping you from doing things the way you want to. My biggest eye-opening conversation was with the CEO of an insurance company very recently, and she mentioned that they're 100% paperless now. And I asked a simple question. I said, "Would you have done that 1 year ago?" And she said, "Absolutely not." Which tells you technology was not the issue. It's a question of change, how fast we are able to deploy that change, how fast we are able to get our workforce to be ready to embrace that change. Um, what will be critical for all the people on this call, and I'm sure you run businesses, is how do you manage this transition from technology moving from being an enabler to now being a differentiator? And how do you resist the temptation to gravitate back to a pre-COVID situation? Don't let this opportunity go. It's been said many times, never waste a crisis. So I think that's how I'm looking at how digitization can change in our country, equally so as it would across the world as well, I'm sure. Mitesh, you have a very keen technology viewpoint on some of these things. Would you want to add any additional flavor, please?
Uh, Thank you, Karan, and thank you, Anshu, and the Edelweiss team. Fantastic to be here. Thank you for the opportunity, and I hope all your viewers are safe. Um, uh, Not much to add to what Karan said. I think he's given a vantage point, business view of things. The only couple of things that I'd love to add to this is that, I think slowly digital was part of a boardroom strategy earlier. Now I think people are discussing that to be the only strategy, right? To really have digital at the core of every organization. I think that is the fundamental thing. And I see that, there are a number of technologies that are going to aid this, right? And it's often said that what would happen in decades has happened in weeks thanks to the pandemic, right? And whether it's collaboration, for example, is a very good way in which we all collaborated. It's likely that we would have done this forum physically together. Somebody would have recorded it, edited it, and put it out there. Now we was much easier to do this in a way. So productivity has gone up, right? Efficiency has gone up, right? The second part is really, being able to sell better and build that ecosystem. I think one of the fundamental things that we've learned, back here at Google is that, the whole, all of your, viewers, whether they are small and medium-sized customers or larger customers, with in various industries, it's about building that ecosystem. And if that ecosystem is digital as you move forward, and the classic example of that is, the Android ecosystem, right? It's really not a product. It's an ecosystem. There are so many phone manufacturers that have developed that, products around it, apps on top of it, and so on. So it's about, starting to look at each of your industries as an ecosystem and really using data. The reality is that 80% of the software code that is written for every company is the same. Karan mentioned banks, right? If you could go and look at every, bank's core systems, right? They're pretty much the same, right? So where's the differentiator? The differentiator where, you separate the wheat from the chaff, as they say, is really in 2 or 3 areas, which are those buzzwords that you mentioned, right? Whether it has got to do with APIs, whether it's got to do with, AI, data, analytics, these, are going to be the differentiators. And, that I think is really going to be, as we move forward, now no more just the differentiators, but slowly those differentiators will become the core, and there'll be newer and newer things that they'll then become differentiators.
Right, and thank you so much. There are a lot of insights, and I have several follow-on questions for this. And if I may just launch into them, Karan, to begin with, you said something
No.
very powerful. Digital is the strategy, and I just wanted to pick up on that. And I'm also going to my personal experience with customers. till last year or maybe a couple of years back, a lot of businesses that I would interact with, digital and technology was this one piece run by the CTO. And in many cases, I saw the CTO being reporting line going into the COO or going into the CFO. So it was one of those things in one part of the organization that was going on. Now certainly because this forceful impact that is so visible now, and you kind of listed a few factors. Do you think it's on the CEO agenda now? If yes, then what is the grapple now CEOs or boardrooms are going through? And how would you advise them? Where do they start their journey? And this was not a core thing for them earlier.
Sure, sure. Thank you, Anshu. I think I have to be very careful in answering these questions because I'm sure there are lots of CTOs on the call as well. But I think it's been said many times now that in a few years' time, every company will be a software company or every company will be a technology company. And that is a telling statement that tells you that in whichever industry you are in, you will either run and lead your business with technology, or your business will be disrupted through the use of technology. There are so many examples across sectors. It's happened to so many industries, so many verticals. You've seen the financial services world. You've seen disruptions in that. You've seen the social media world. You've seen the hotel industry, the travel industry, and more it is coming to the core of traditional industry as well. It will happen. It's a question of time. So first of all, CEOs have to realize that change and be very comfortable with technology. With due respect to most CEOs, if you look at, and I think this is changing. A lot of CEOs are not comfortable with technology, and they need to understand that technology is no longer an enabler for their business. It possibly to one extreme is their business, or it is heavily going to impact how they run, drive, and grow their businesses. So that's a very, very clear thing. It is a CEO agenda. I'm seeing it more and more across industry. CEOs want to learn more. They are very keen to have conversations. Over the last 1 year, I must tell you this, and this is a personal experience. I've spoken to at least 75 of the large CEOs in this country, and it has been a one-to-one conversation. I never could find a one-to-one conversation with a CEO in the past. They always wanted a larger group and, of course, have the CTO, the CIO there. In the last 1 year itself, I've seen that fundamental shift. And they come with a very inquisitive mind. They don't come with a point of view. They come with an inquisitive mind of, tell me more. Tell me how, as a technology company, you would do this if you were to do this today. Start a bank, start a manufacturing shop, a retail company, if you have zero knowledge of the past or zero legacy. So I think that's the one change I'm seeing in the interest of the CEOs. Now, it has to go beyond interest, right? How does a CEO track their business? Just the way they have business initiatives, they must track and measure if they are really delivering to the desired business outcomes. One of the risks that you have with technology is that you could actually get carried away with a lot of shiny conversations that somehow you may not be able to measure the direct impact on your business. So just the way you run a business initiative and measure the ROI, CEOs will have to set up and build that comfort to deliver that and measure that business outcome. Some of the things that I can recommend is, first of all, don't let digital be somewhere at the fringe of what you are doing. It should be at the core. When disruption hits a business, it does not hit the fringe of that business. It hits the core of that business. So when you're making digital investments, make sure those investments are touching the core of your business, not like the 5% of your business that you want to try and pilot. I have said so many times that, unfortunately, our country is a graveyard of pilots. We've done so many pilots and we have done so many repeated pilots. We almost don't learn from each other. We want all to rediscover. And I always tell people technology is not the issue. So please don't try test technology. Test it in your environment to your relevance. And make sure when you're making those investments, they're touching the core of your business and not the fringe of your business. The second part I would really recommend is build comfort around tracking ROI on digital investments. So, and what that will do, Anshu, in my mind, is that will change the mindset of thinking of digital and IT investments as a cost. It is not. You have to stop thinking of these as elements of, yes, they are elements of cost, but you've got to stop thinking of them in the dimension of only cost, because they are now driving and touching the core of your business. And in a few years, you may be running just through that model. How many times have we seen that banks and manufacturing companies, supply chain companies that change their entire engagement with their customers to be digital led? And I think so, build a comfort around being able to track the ROI on digital investments. Understand the time it takes to market for the digital projects, and these pilots don't do technology for the sake of technology. It's do it for the core of business, as I said. So, how much time can you get a digital innovation project off the ground? If it's more than a few weeks, I don't think you're either doing it wrong or you're testing the wrong things, which means you're going back to testing technology. Any time to market for a digital intervention should be weeks and not months in that sense. And then finally, start linking performance incentives for your core business. Now, please mind me, it's not about just measuring your CIO and CTO and say your incentives are linked to digital projects. Absolutely not. Your core business leaders' performance should be linked to how they embrace digital. So think about what I told. The insurance CEO said technology was not the issue. The issue was embracing. So your performance incentives of core business leaders have to be linked to success of these digital initiatives. And finally, be very comfortable hiring different, right? If you are a manufacturing company, and I'm sure there are a lot of manufacturing companies, think about how do you hire top talent, top technical talent, to really bring life into your digital initiatives. It's got nothing to say that the core domain people are not relevant. No, they absolutely are. It's a combination of that domain specialist and the tech specialist and bringing them together. So be very comfortable hiring top tech talent, especially if you are a so-called non-information technology business in that sense. And the CEOs and the CXOs should spend a lot of time in following in some of the areas of their organization technology function. So more investment into the technology functions. How do you bring the CIO and CTO closer to the business? Think through, where does the CIO and CTO reports today? If it reports further away from you, think why. Your resourcing model to support technology investments. So move away from the dimension of cost alone when you look at technology. And finally, embracing technology that allows you to be both agile and flexible. So those are some of the things in my mind. I'm sorry I went a little too long on this one, but this is a passionate subject for me, especially as we're going through this change where now technology is at the CEO's table and at the board's table in that sense.
Right, Karan. Actually, you brought in a very interesting dimension, the organizational dimension. And I do not think that many of our customers are really grappling with that or even thinking about that. One is the the reporting part that you mentioned, but two more important points you made were metrics of performance measurement and aligning incentives. So
Sure.
one is to fight incumbency, two is to creating enablers or drivers that will empower the organization to rally behind. Actually, it would be a complete topic in itself, and maybe we'll touch upon it later. And I'll save it for further questioning for later on, but it's a very important dimension.
Sure.
I will move on and actually ask this question. Mitesh, you brought about this point on ecosystem. And the backdrop to this question is that whenever I've chatted with businesses or business leaders, and I have asked them, okay, how have you adapted to the pandemic? What changes did you make on technology or digital? A very common response has been okay, now we are selling online. There is a so-called digital storefront, right? And that is what they are very passionate about because there's a lot of effort that has gone in and some orders are coming in. New way of accessing the customer, right? Is that enough? When you say ecosystem, what does that mean to you? And if you could just give us maybe some examples of them, that'd be great.
Yeah, so thank you, Anshu. Uh, I think it's a good start. Let me put it that way, right? At least having a digital storefront is a good start. But I think what's also equally important is, not just having a storefront, but being able to straight through process, right? And why I mentioned that is because you think about what happened during the pandemic, right? How would a retailer do demand forecasting suddenly? Very different dimension in the way demand forecasting was done, right? if your plants had to be shut down, how do you decide which ones go first, right? And which are the ones that you reopen post the shutdown first, right? So how do you therefore measure productivity of your plants, your people, employees, and therefore the ROI that you get, right? Now, it's the same thing, right? I mean, we all, and there's a fundamental thing that, I got from what Karan mentioned earlier. I think this is about habit changing. And I think, I don't know if all of you do this, but the first thing we all do now is not brush our teeth when we get up in the morning, right? We pick up our phone, right? So, that's habit changing. So when I said Android ecosystem, that's what I meant, right? That this is about fundamental changes in habits, of, your end customers that each one of us serve, irrespective of the industry that you're in, right? And when it becomes habit changing, then it's a snowball effect. Then it's momentum, right? It starts with that inertia and then it's momentum, and you have no stop there. So my fundamental view on that is that, totally agree with what Karan said, right? Don't do technology for technology's sake. Karan mentioned that, he's mentioned 75, he met 75 plus CEOs in the last few months, right? One-on-one, where they were very interested in technology. Here's a corollary to that, right? I've had the pleasure of, talking to a lot of CTOs, CDOs, and CIOs, and it's very interesting. Their habits have begun to change to say, hey, I know your technology will work, right? Now tell me, how do I go and make sure that I get the right business ROI? So I think there is that, very nice, vantage point that everybody is getting to, right? So the real story there is, it's great to start with a digital storefront, but straight through processing is what will help you scale your business, right? And therefore, all these terms become very important. Therefore, data analytics becomes very important. Therefore, modernizing your applications, modernizing your infrastructure becomes very, very important, irrespective of the industry that you're part of.
Right. And Karan, just a follow-on question from all these points that I've just gathered. Now, it appears that services is the affinity for services industry to adapt digital seems to be very high out there. But there's so many of our customers who run traditional industries like retail or manufacturing. Um, all those hardware-oriented, hardwired kind of industry. Is digital for them, and is there a different dimension or a playbook that they need to look at?
Sure. And I would ask you to be cautious about terming things like retail as traditional. Yeah, there is a traditional form of retail, but retail is as modern as possibly any other digital native business. The way retail has to happen today and in the future will be very, very different. So these are by no means, legacy industries, if you will. And if you look at manufacturing companies, again, I would be cautious in not calling them any way traditional because, again, the amount of change that has happened in the manufacturing organizations in the core of their manufacturing, leave aside the digital part of it, is already always been kind of high on their agenda. In fact, a lot of manufacturing companies had already been evaluating the whole industry 4.0 transformation journey even prior to COVID-19. And if you look at some of the industry 4.0 technologies like data, AI, machine learning, IoT, all of these have played a very important role, Anshu, in enabling these companies to sort of better manage their response to disruptions, whether it is keeping operations up and running in the face of your shortage of workers, keeping your raw materials up and running, and on track, and there was a sudden spike or suppression in demand, and based on the industry or the subsegment of manufacturing these organizations are in, they're choosing to accelerate focus or pause the whole engagement accordingly. So there is in my view, there's three or four things, and I then try to call in Nitesh in terms of addressing some of these specifics. I think there's almost like a basic framework that each business could use to approach their digitization effort, irrespective of which sector or vertical you are in. Number one, as I said, align your digitization efforts with your core and to your changing customer expectations. and think through. The one rule of thumb is, how would you do your business if you were setting it up for the first time? That simply allows you to not gravitate back to the old way of doing it. And yet there are some elements you may want to go back, but always checkpoint. If somebody in your sector was starting today, how would he or she do it? And how do you match up to that change? That's the first thing. I spoke about data versus gut. Use more and more data driven insights to improve performance and operations, because that's what your competition is doing. The third piece is, boldly modernize your adoption of technology and choose the right stack. I by no means want to say one stack versus the other. Choose the right stack and tools that support your transition in terms of aligning with the changed customer expectations or just the changed environment in your business. And finally, the most important thing that we sometimes miss while we get awed by the sheen of technology is when it comes into your four walls, how is it being embraced, which is, accelerate the pace of reskilling and building a very diverse and a digitally savvy workforce, not by any means diluting the core domain that you are in, but being very comfortable bringing in deep digital practitioners, if you will, to work with them and drive the change in your business. I think it'll be good, Mitesh, if you can, apply these rules to some of the foundational technologies. And let's talk from a manufacturing value chain perspective. If you could give a sense of how some of those changes around connectivity, analytics, machine learning can apply to the industry today. So it would be interesting to get your perspective, Mitesh.
Sure. Thank you, Karan. And so if you really look at this, Anshu, Karan mentioned some foundations that you set, right? And as I said, they are habit changing. In our minds, we believe that if you have to take those foundational technologies and apply it to the manufacturing value chain, right? I mean, and people have called it Industry 4.0 transformation already, right? But there are four foundational elements. The first one is around connectivity, data, your infrastructure, the computational power, and that's not just back at the data center, but out there in the front, right? And you said it's very hardware centric. It is, right? It is true even in the Industry 4.0 journey, because if you look at sensors, you look at Internet of Things, whether you look at cloud technologies, whether you look at blockchain, all of these are the foundational elements. Now on top of that is where you build analytics, and really analytics is to derive value, derive insights. And for that you need to embed intelligence into not just your devices, but also how do you get that through your machinery and to a dashboard that one can use. That's where machine learning models start working in, AI starts helping you, and you can really enable a lot of new, unlock a lot of new value with advanced analytics. The third part, which I think is super important, right, is around human machine interaction. The reality is that, as you rightly said, if you look at the traditional manufacturing segment, for them to, really be able to digitize, do the straight through processing, you need to have a lot of human machine interaction. And that's typically enabled by, what people call virtual and augmented reality. You could use robotics, you could use automation tools, you could use RPA, you could use chatbots, and so on and so forth. So there is this whole area of human machine interaction that is becoming like a fundamental area for success. And finally, if you really look at this, there is lots of advancement that's happening around core engineering areas in manufacturing, right? So if you look at things like additive manufacturing, example, 3D printing, right? Or renewable energy, it's super important that, so for example, when you are trying to partner with a technology partner, and if they don't understand, carbon emissions, if they don't understand sustainability, right? It's very difficult then to, really be able to partner in the technology stack. So I think, those four foundational technologies are super important as, the traditional organizations, go in there. My suggestion would be, it's not necessary to do all of this big bang. And that's where I think, cloud helps. You can go in with a stack. And as Karan said, you can go in with any stack, but you can start experimenting and you can really fail fast or succeed fast and move forward. Right. So I think that's where really we are seeing the changes.
Right. And if I may just ask you a little follow on that, because I don't want it to appear so overwhelming that our customers who are listening and are getting interested, or, say, oh my God, this sounds too much to do. So now with all the technologies that are available, and Karan talked about a few weeks to deploy. So what does it entail, and how costly is it? And let's say mid-sized manufacturing setup wants to embark on this journey. And what does it mean to have choose a stack? And what do you choose from the stack? How do you do it? How easy, convenient? How much will it sink my time, resources, effort? So if you could just elaborate on that.
Sure. Karan, should I take a stab at that?
Yeah, please do.
Yep. So to me, I think one of the elements that we've missed, and thanks Anshu for bringing that out, is a lot of this sounds overwhelming, but it's incredibly actually easy to do. And I think that's the part of technology that has really helped. And which is why I go back to the ecosystem example, right? If I just, if you were a CEO of a small and medium enterprise, right, and you didn't have a large IT team to, really take care of this, the question is, look, I may not be able to put a team together, first of all. So how do I do this, right? So if you really look at, almost everybody's come up with things like starter kits, right? So you can straight away have templatized access to this. The second part is that now you don't need to own any of this infrastructure. You can, and that's the promise of cloud, right? You can simply rent it off, any of the big cloud providers, right? The third part, and I think super crucial, is that how do you do the scaling part, and which is why Karan's final point was very, very important, right? That as much as you may not have the resources, you do need to invest in someone who can understand this as applicable to your company,
Right.
right? Or your organization. So we've seen that, and you'll be surprised, right? And that not just the pandemic, but people were thinking about it, but they were worried about the technology. The pandemic forced them to, start experimenting. And we suddenly see, 70, 80% of these organizations already have experimented with one stack or the other, right? And our view is that making it simple, making it templatized, right, not worrying about the skills, allowing the complexity to be handled by organizations like us, is really where we work, right? And we have teams, whether they are our business teams, whether they are our technology teams, whether there are services teams that are out there to help customers to really adopt this at scale. Karan, I don't know if you want to add something to this,
No,
please.
thank you for taking that so well, Nitesh. I would just say, think about, Anshu, if you are a mid-market SMB or a mid-market customer, you are looking forward to the time that all of this pandemic will end and people will do what we now famously call as revenge shopping and revenge travel, and suddenly it's going to fuel the whole manufacturing sector, and then by virtue of that, the rest of the sectors, there's going to be that cascading effect. People are looking forward to that. So if you are and then we are giving you all this spiel about technology and then more use of technology, and you're like saying, gosh, I've got $100 to spend, or 100, whatever, 100 crore, 100 million, whatever it is, that amount to spend on, and should I spend it on my core business, increase my manufacturing capability, or should I then buy all this technology? And how would I tell you, if you have $100 to spend on your business, in terms of your capital that you're carrying right now, I would just sort of go to the extreme of say, don't spend a single dollar of that capital on technology. Use it to expand your core business, because technology consumption models, Anshu, are now way mature, that you don't need to buy technology in the archaic way of buying hardware and then buying software licensing and then getting somebody to put that together and support you, and then you worry about obsolescence and did I do the right thing and return of investment. Oh, I've got this much stuck now. I need to sort of capitalize it over 5 years. All of that is passe. You can literally consume uh, all of the technology through operational expenses and not scarce capital dollars in that sense. You're a finance guy, you will understand this way more. People will take more from you or invest more with you, and then they can still grow their businesses with technology without spending a dollar of capital. So I think the wise thing to do. But look, will technology spend increase with all this? 100% yes. 100%. When you are a technology led or a technology driven company, you have to invest in technology. Gone are the days you could get done having a sustainable business, facing all the disruption in the sector, and yet do only 2% investment on technology. That's gone. But you can invest in technology in a very meaningful way, which does not chew up your scarce capital, and use more consumption models of technology, use more SaaS-based models, use more cloud-based models, yet get the same outcome with a lower entry barrier and an equally lower exit barrier. Something doesn't work for you, as Mitesh said, learn fast, fail fast. Move on, try new things. Something will click. So I think the technology adoption models, and this is more important for mid enterprises than it is for large enterprises. Large enterprises can afford to invest capital, but mid market, absolutely not. And technology today is matured out to allow you to use consumption based models versus traditional buy models in that sense.
Right. And I just wanted to underscore this point. This is a very important point for a lot of our audience. The fact that you don't have to be really large to be able to spend on technology or want to venture into direction. As long as you can articulate what you need, and to 70% or 80% out there, there are these services available. It's a service now. It's not something that you buy and put it at the premises. So it's a service that you could subscribe to, see if it works, then you can change as you go. So this is a summary of what we're hearing, and that's a very powerful statement. So, Karan, if I may just add to that and maybe probe you further. So these 75 CEOs are these large companies, or do you now also count from 50 small enterprises saying, we also want to get onto the digital transformation journey?
No, so I think it's a mix. Obviously, they are the top CEOs across most sectors. But I would say yes, absolutely. I've spoken to uh, sort of very new age organizations that are just emerging out of their Series A in that sense. So I've spoken to many kinds of sizes and sectors of organizations. So it's not bound by just scale and size. And interestingly, Anshu, the technology adoption is not bound by size. You'd be surprised some of the fastest consumers of technology, in our case, cloud, have been the young companies. So, I wouldn't say it's by size, and yet I've spoken to the largest banks, the largest retailers, the largest manufacturing organizations, the conglomerates across the country, all of those, and equally so the mid-market clients as well. It's so interesting. Some of the mid-market clients are way more agile. They have less to break and hence more to make. Actually, this is the point I wanted to make, and I was hoping you'd ask me this at some point, which is the opportunity for India, in many cases, for the Indian mid market, is the same opportunity 20, 25 years ago India had in telecom, which means you did not have much to break and hence you could embrace. India went from 0 to billion users on mobile, the fastest in the world possibly. And this is the same way, possibly adoption of consumption models, SaaS models, cloud models can happen way faster in the mid market because there's not much to break in that sense. The opportunity for an Indian mid market enterprise is to embrace technology way faster, way better, increase your whether it is productivity, efficiency, go to market, supply chains, ecosystems, all of that through use of digital way faster than your competitors in other countries because they have more to break than you do in that sense.
Fabulous. I think that is very interesting, and I'm sure a lot of our customers are completely focused on. I'm conscious of time, and let me just quickly ask a couple of more questions. And this one is for both of you. What are the top three trends, if you were to call out, and very India specific, in this journey or in this decade or the next 2 years? What are the top three trends you will call out?
And by trends, do you mean trends on technology or more broadly?
I think, yeah, technology, but from an applicability to the business, our audience perspective. So,
Yeah,
what those three things mean?
you know, I, I, I would really hesitate to give you buzzwords and say it is AI, machine learning. Yeah, because I would really feel the trends are use technology more boldly in your business. Use technology at the core of your business. Be very comfortable bringing in technology at the core, and be very bold in terms of embracing the changed organization phase where a manufacturing company has software developers to better embrace technology at the core of their manufacturing operations. So those for me are more important trends, because as both Mitesh and I said earlier, it's not technology for the sake of technology. I don't want to, and yet, I think Mitesh, you should take a stab. We should talk about, because we do have a very keen point of view on technology. But for the clients, I wanted to say those are more important reasons for you to embrace than, I worry when a CEO comes to me and says, I want to do a pilot on AI. And I say, why? Why do you want to do a pilot on AI? You're not an AI company. Why do you want to do a pilot on AI? No, I want to. So I think this whole concept of trying things and seeing if it will work is more fashion than it is meaningful. So I would love a conversation to say, well, I want to change this part of my business. Tell me what will make it happen. It may be AI for all that you know, but it is not technology for the sake of technology. A lot of work has been done in the industry for the last 4 5 years in terms of being comfortable with our technology, and I think that's not important. Um, what is important is being comfortable with scaling the use of technology in your core business. That is more important to you versus trying to do a pilot. uh, I now, whenever it is a new technology, I almost, if a customer tells me to do a pilot, I almost sort of get disinterested to say they're testing and they're comparing speeds and feeds, which is not what technology is all about. So that's how I would say. And Nitesh, would you want to add, please?
Sure, thanks. I think the one thing that the last 11 or 12 months have taught us is that, how we live, how we work, how we communicate as we are right now, how we are going to learn, as we've seen with the whole ed tech revolution, as people have called it, right? They all seem to change, right? And they all have transformed. Like this whole revolution of instantness with everything has started, right? And people have therefore started to consume things very differently. So one of the areas, and I know Karan will say it's a buzzword, but we do see, the practical applicability of this because of the way we're communicating, the way we're going to live, the way we're going to learn, is this whole notion of, ambient computing. What do I mean by that? Right. What I mean by that is that, how do I give a single, consistent consumer experience, right? While you're at home, like the way we are right now, right? Or you're at work, like Anshu looks like you are at work, right? Or you are on the road, right? So how do I give you the same consistent experience, right? And that's a very interesting area, right, for India, because usually what the pandemic taught us is that, look, if I was in a branch, right, as a retailer, right, or if I was in a bank branch as a teller, right, my experience was in one way, but as soon as I was at home and I had to do the same work, my experience was totally different, right? I had to set up all these technology gadgets that the company had never thought of buying for me, right? And then there was a security challenge and all of that, right, which came in, right? So we really see that to be a fundamental area. And I think the second area is really going to be around, this whole area of security, but in a very different way, because as soon as I have ambient computing happening, right, my customer experience or my experience as an individual starts from, the time I get up in the morning to the time I go back to sleep, right? So really the whole domain of security is going to be very, very interesting, right? I think there's been a lot of confusion around that more than anything else. People only look at security from a data security perspective, but overall, it's an area that I do believe is going to be very interesting as we move forward.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Very powerful thoughts. And I think we have time for just one or two questions. Karan, if you have the time, we'll just take one or two questions. Is that okay?
Sure, please. We could
We
do
have a
quick
few,
rapid fire if that's okay.
yeah, we have a few questions on the pop-up. Um, what are the most critical factors to ensure a digital transformation project?
What are the most critical
Factors.
factors to ensure a digital project succeeds?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I touched on it when I was talking about how a CEO has to drive the success. I think projects will succeed if they are meaningful to you. If they, as I said, if they are touching the core of your business and not the fringe of your business, and you will then do everything to make it successful. And second, if your business leaders are invested in it as much as your technology leaders. So those would be, in my view, two critical factors: hitting your core and getting your business leaders aligned.
Right. And if you may just one last question. It's about the organization and the incumbency factor. So how does one address that? I think you touched upon that, but any other thoughts you have? Karan?
Um, you know, incumbency is don't treat it like a baggage. Treat it like a major learning asset. The fact that you have some legacy and some incumbency, treat it like a learning that should not hold you back. Um, the industry and businesses do not respect tradition, they respect creativity. And so use your incumbency to learn things, learn more about things that you should not do, and then be ready to embrace things that are new in your business. That's how I would sort of, and yet, I'm very respectful that fact that you can't dump away the dollars that you've invested. Uh, so, as I said, walk into your office, and when you do, think about how would you do your business if you were doing it for the first time. Think about all the things you would do if it was the first time, and then start bringing in, oh, by the way, I invested X last year, so I have to capitalize that. Bring in the barriers later on, but just first in your blueprint, think as if you were setting up your business for the first time.
Fabulous. I know there are a lot of other questions also, but we are out of time. We look forward to carrying the discussion forward. Karan, Mitesh, thank you so much. It's been a delight. I have enjoyed this conversation. I have learned a lot. I've taken a lot of notes for my own business, and maybe I'll follow up with you for the guidance. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care and wish you all the best. And it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anshu, and thanks everyone.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.